My horse had been tended before I woke for 11 days before I understood who was doing it. Not a small thing, this. Rufus was 15 years old and slightly lame in the right foreleg since March, and someone had been poulticing it every morning before I came to the barn, wrapping it properly. The kind of wrap that takes practice, not the improvised kind. Someone had been refreshing his water and checking his bedding and speaking to him in a low voice, because Rufus had a way of being calm that he was not when he'd been alone all night. And a horse that is calm tells you something about who has been in his company. I had suspects. I was wrong about all of them. The first week I had 4 candidates. By the second week I had eliminated 3. One was in Cheyenne for the month on railroad business. One was bedridden with a knee that had finally given out after 30 years of cattle work. And one I saw arriving in town from the south on the 3rd morning, which meant he had not come from the north, which was the only direction from which the morning work made geographical sense. The 4th suspect I refused to name to myself for another 5 days, because naming him would have required thinking about something I preferred not to think about. His name was Finn Calloway. He ran 280 acres to the north of my property. We had been in a boundary dispute for 2 years. He was the last man I was willing to be in any way indebted to, and the most likely explanation. My name is May Aldrin. I have run the Aldrin place since my husband Daniel died in the autumn of 1880. 120 acres of Wyoming plateau grass and rocky pasture. One good, well, a barn, a chicken house, and the cabin Daniel and I had built together in the summer of 1878, and that I had maintained alone since. We had come from Illinois, Daniel and I, following the Homestead Act the way a great many people followed it in those years, with the conviction that 160 acres of western land and 5 years of improvement was a better prospect than another decade of tenant farming in a state that had no room left for people who hadn't already bought their place in it. Daniel was a good man and a competent farmer, and he died of something that started as a cough and became something that Doctor in Laramie could not name in time to treat. He was 41 years old. We had been married for 11 years. After Daniel died, I sat with the grief for exactly as long as I could afford to, which was the winter, and in the spring I went back to work. This is what you do when you have land and animals, and the alternative to working is losing both. You work. You learn what you did not know how to do, and you do it badly at first and better over time. And after 3 years, you know how to do most of it well enough. And the knowing is the thing that gets you up in the mornings, when the getting up is otherwise difficult to justify. What I had not learned in 3 years was how to ask for help. What I had learned instead was how not to need it, which is a different skill and which serves a different purpose. I had learned to be sufficient in the specific and narrow way that means you never give anyone the chance to refuse you. It is a good way to manage a farm. It is a poor way to manage the rest of a life. But I had not examined that distinction carefully. Rufus was the keystone of the operation. Without him, I could not properly manage the north fence, could not haul the winter wood, could not get to the county seat or the general store, or anywhere that required more than walking distance. He was $22 of horse in 1883 Wyoming, which was a significant investment. And when his foreleg went lame in March, I spent 3 nights making calculations and arrived at no satisfactory answer. I could manage without him for a week, possibly 2. Beyond that, things would begin to slip. Then someone started tending him. I should say what I knew about Finn Calloway before the barn. And what I had refused to know, what I knew, he had come to Wyoming in 1875 with a wife named Clara and a son named Thomas. And Clara had died of a fever in 1878, and Thomas had died in a barn accident in December of 1882 when a beam shifted and a 12-year-old boy was in the wrong place at the wrong moment. What the county knew and had been careful to leave alone was that Finn had been in the barn when it happened and had not been able to get the boy free in time. This was not his fault in any way a reasonable person could assign fault. It was simply the kind of thing that happens in the West, where the work is dangerous and children learn the work young, and where being in the wrong place at the wrong moment is not a failure of care, but a failure of luck. And the difference between the two is the whole of a man's life afterward. I had sent a note. He had sent back 2 words. I had respected the silence that followed because it was the silence I would have wanted. What I had refused to know was that Finn Calloway's son had been 12 years old, which was the age at which a boy is old enough to help seriously with the work and young enough that his father still carries the feeling of being responsible for everything bad that could happen to him. And that a man who loses that is a man whose sense of responsibility for things around him does not disappear with the loss. It simply redirects. It has to go somewhere. It always goes somewhere. The fence dispute had begun in the spring of 1881, 4 months after Daniel's death. Finn Calloway had hired a private surveyor from Laramie, not the county surveyor, who was overworked and imprecise, but a private man he'd commissioned specifically, and that surveyor had come back with a line that placed 18 acres of what I had considered my north pasture inside Finn's boundary. I disputed this with the original homestead filing. He disputed my dispute with the survey. We had exchanged formal letters for 6 months, civil and detailed, and going nowhere. And then the correspondence had stopped because there was nothing new to say. And the matter sat at the county recorder's office like a stone at the bottom of a pond, not resolving, not going away. For 2 years I had checked the north fence every morning, partly to ensure nothing had changed. Partly, I can admit now, because the dispute had become its own kind of occupation, something to have an opinion about, something to be right about. When everything else is uncertain, being right about a fence line has a particular appeal. Finn Calloway was at the north fence sometimes when I made my rounds, and we were always civil. Civil in the precise way of 2 people who know the other is wrong and are choosing for the moment not to argue about it. He was not an unpleasant man. He was direct and economical with words, and he always removed his hat when a woman was within 20 feet, which was an old courtesy and one I noticed without meaning to. He was difficult in the particular way that precise people are difficult when they are also right, which was the part one found most aggravating. His wife had died in 1878, the year Finn came to Wyoming. His son, Thomas, 12 years old when he died, had been killed in a barn accident in the winter of 1882. I had heard about it from the woman at the general store, who told me in a quiet voice that meant the county was being careful about Finn's privacy. I had sent a note. He had sent back, "Thank you, May Aldrin." I had left him alone after that, because that is what I would have wanted. I had not understood until the night in the barn that the horse tending had started 3 months after Thomas died. On the 11th morning, I found a tin of liniment on Rufus's feed shelf, not purchased at the county store, which was how I knew. The county store carried one brand, which was adequate but thin. This was the Laramie brand, which was thicker and worked better on older joints. The Laramie druggist was 20 miles away. Someone had ridden 20 miles in both directions to buy a tin of liniment for a horse that was not theirs. I stood in the barn for a long time holding the tin. Then I went inside and made my coffee and did not go to the fence that morning. I told myself I was thinking about it. What I was actually doing was working up to a conclusion I had already reached and was not yet ready to hold in my hands. On the 13th night, I lit the lamp in the kitchen window and went to the barn at 11 o'clock and sat down in the darkness behind the feed storage. With a horse blanket over my shoulders and waited, he came at 4 in the morning. I heard his horse at the far fence first, not at my gate, which he was apparently not using, but at the fence line itself, which meant he was leaving his horse on his side and coming on foot.
About that
I
back
heard
fence.
the barn door
I'll mend
open,
the split rails.
and then the sound of a
Starting
lantern
tomorrow.
being struck.
I can't keep doing
And
this
then
alone,
Finn
Finn.
Calloway was in the light of it, moving to Rufus's stall with the ease of a man who has done this in the dark before and knows exactly where everything is. He knew what he was doing. He checked the water first, then the bedding, then the leg, running both hands, down the foreleg with the careful systematic attention of someone checking for specific things in a specific sequence. He removed the old poultice and prepared the new one, mixing the liniment with the efficiency of someone who had found the right proportion over multiple applications. He wrapped the leg in a way that was better than how I had learned to do it. He checked the feed. And then he spoke to Rufus, not to himself, not to anyone, to the horse, in a low, steady voice. I could not make out the words. I could make out the tone, which was the tone a person uses with an animal they have decided to take care of. The same tone I used. The same tone anyone uses when they have decided something is their responsibility, whether it is technically theirs or not. He worked for 20 minutes. He did not look toward the back of the barn. He was not performing. He was working. When he was done, he extinguished the lantern and left the barn, and I heard him cross the field back to his horse, and they sound of hoofbeats moving away north in the dark. I sat in the barn for a long time after the sound was gone. I sat with several things I had been not sitting with for 3 years. The particular loneliness of a woman who has made herself self-sufficient and has succeeded so completely that there is no longer any gap
Fence needs
through which
fixing.
anything can
Again.
come in. The specific
always does.
exhaustion of being right about everything all the time and having no one to be wrong with. The fence. The 18 acres. The fact that somewhere in the past 2 years I had stopped seeing Finn Calloway as a man with his own losses and had been seeing him only as a person on the wrong side of my boundary line. I thought about Thomas, 12 years old. A barn accident. Finn alone in that big house to the north, running 280 acres. The same way I was running my 120, by necessity, by stubbornness, by the refusal to examine what was missing too carefully. I thought about the liniment. 20 miles. I went back to the house when the sky began to lighten. I made coffee. I watched the sun come up over the Wyoming plateau in the way it does in May, slowly at first, and then all at once. In the morning, I went to the north fence. Finn was at his far corner, working on a post. He looked up when he saw me. He straightened. I had 2 years of fence dispute at the back of my throat, ready. The homestead filing and the original survey and the county recorder's office and the 18 acres and Daniel breaking that ground before Finn had ever seen. Wyoming. What came out was nothing. I closed my mouth. I looked at him across the fence line. He looked back at me across the fence line. Neither of us said a word. After a long moment, Finn nodded once, not a greeting exactly, more an acknowledgement, the kind that says I see you, and I'm not going to make this difficult, and went back to his post. I went back to my side of the fence, and the silence between us was heavier than 2 years of arguments, and I understood that something had shifted in it. I did not say anything about the barn. Not then. I thought about it for 4 days. Not constantly. I had animals to tend and a fence line to maintain and a kitchen garden to weed in May. And the work absorbed the hours as it always did. But in the corners of the days, in the mornings before sunrise and the evenings when the work was done, I thought about what it means when a person does something for you without telling you they're doing it. Not as a service rendered and recorded, not as a favor called in or anticipated. Just doing it in the dark, before light, because the thing needed doing and they had decided to do it. I had received things this way before. Daniel had been a man who did things without announcing them, who fixed what was broken before you noticed it was broken and left no record. And I had understood it in him as love, which is what it is. I thought about that word for a long time, and then I set it aside because it was too large to hold on a Wednesday morning in Wyoming with the deer fence to check and the cow to milk. I thought about what it meant and what I was going to do about it, and whether doing anything about it was necessary or whether some things could simply be received without requiring a response. I thought about the fence. I thought about what the fence had actually been about for me in the 2 years since Daniel died. Whether the 18 acres was the thing, or whether the 18 acres was what I had put in the place of the thing. Whether being right about the boundary line was something I actually cared about, or whether it was something to hold on to because it gave me a reason to be certain about, something in a period when I was not certain about much. I thought about a man riding 20 miles in the dark for a 10 of liniment on. The 6th day I went to the general store for flour. Finn came in while I was at the counter. We nodded. He went to the back for salt blocks. I waited, which was not something I had planned. I was done with my purchase. I could have left. I waited while he got his salt blocks and paid and was putting his change away. And then I said, "The Laramie liniment is better than the county store brand." He looked at me. I said, "I prefer it too." Rufus is 15 years old. His joints need the thicker formula. Finn was quiet for a moment. He said, "Older joints generally do." I said, "You knew the right wrapping technique." "Someone taught you," he said. "I had horses in Ohio. I had a son who loved horses. The storekeeper was very busy with something in the back room." I said, "I think the private surveyor's line is probably correct." Finn looked at his hat, which he was holding at his side. He said, "May, I'm not interested in taking land from you." I said, "I know you're not." "I think I've known that for a while." He said, "The leg will need the poultice through August. Maybe September if the weather turns cold early." I said, "I know." "I've been managing it," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have to manage everything alone." I looked at him. The sentence was about the horse, and it was not about the horse. And we both understood this, and neither of us said so. Because some things are more clearly communicated by the fact of not saying them, I said. "That's true of most things." He nodded once. He said, "I'll come by Tuesday to check the leg, if that's all right." I said, "I'll have coffee on." He went out. I paid for my flour. I walked home along the road that goes past the north fence line, and I looked at the fence and thought about what 18 acres meant against other things, and I could not make it come out as much as I had thought it did. He came Tuesday. He tied his horse at the gate and knocked at the barn door first. Rufus first, always, which I noted and appreciated without saying so. By the time I came out to greet him, the leg had been checked, and he had already formed a view on the progress. He said, "He's using it more evenly this week." I said, "The new liniment might be helping." He said, "Probably." We went inside. He came the next Tuesday and the Tuesday after, and the Tuesdays began to have a quality that was different from what Tuesdays had been before them. They had a different weight in the week. I noticed on Mondays that it was almost Tuesday, which was not something I had noticed about any other day of the week in 3 years of managing things alone. I made note of this and did not examine it directly, because examining things directly was still a habit. I was working against Dot by the 3rd Tuesday. The coffee was waiting when he arrived, and we both pretended this was simply practical. And by the 5th Tuesday, we were having the coffee at the kitchen table and talking about things that had nothing to do with horses or fence lines. He talked about Ohio and about his son a little carefully, the way a person handles something that has been fragile and is beginning to be less fragile. I talked about Illinois and about Daniel in the same way. Neither of us pressed. Neither of us looked away. The boundary dispute was formally resolved in January of 1884, which was 6 months after the general store conversation. We resolved it with the county recorder's office and the required documentation, and the line stayed where the private surveyor had put it, and the paperwork said Finn Calloway had been right about the boundary. I signed the document with my name. He signed with his. We walked out of the county recorder's office into a Wyoming January, and Finn held the door, and I walked through it, and we stood on the wooden sidewalk of Laramie in the cold. And he said, "That took longer than it needed to." I said, "Most things do dot." He asked me in February. We were at the north fence, which had become a place we visited not from habit but from intention, a place that had accumulated enough to it by then that it was worth standing at for reasons that had nothing to do with surveying. He said, "I would like to ask you something, and I'd like you not to think about the fence while I'm asking." I said, "I'll do my best." He asked. I said yes without the best being required. We were married in April. When the Wyoming spring came in the tentative way it always does, a little at a time, testing whether it's welcome, pulling back when it isn't sure, and then arriving fully when the ground is ready. The fence is still there. The post he was working on the morning, I stood at the boundary and said nothing. He replaced that post himself, and it is the straightest post on the North Line, and I have looked at it more times than I've counted. Some things mark a moment without trying. Rufus recovered fully by October. He worked for 3 more years before his age made rest more appropriate than labor. And he spent his last years in the north pasture, which had been the disputed pasture, which neither Finn nor I had planned, and both of us appreciated without saying so. I never told Finn I was in the barn that night. He never asked if I knew. There are things in a long marriage that don't need to be said to be true. The knowing is enough.